Good day. If you are an observer of political events going on in the world now, you'll be wondering what really is going on in President Vladimir Zelensky's mind. President Zelensky is facing a lot of pressures. Pressure to run an election, pressure to continue with the war, pressure to end the war, pressure, pressure. And one of the pressures is now facing is the pressure that is being put on him by people who speculate that he may soon be removed. Well, it so turns out that President Zelensky has put on his thinking cap and he has decided that he's going to be proactive. He has changed his cabinet and then he has initiated negotiations, continuation of negotiations or discussions with the Russians in Istanbul. One of the outcomes is seeking in that meeting in Istanbul, which we now have a date for. It will be happening on Wednesday, 2 days from today. One of the outcomes he seeks is that he wants a meeting with President Putin. If believes that meeting with President Putin can help accelerate and move this Ukraine-Russia war to a possible conclusion. But for the Russians, they don't want anything to do with Zelensky, particularly since President Putin, who is a lawyer, I should point out, has said that President Zelensky is illegitimate. He's not, in his reckoning, the president of Ukraine anymore. He thinks that because he has not held an election and he has used extrajudicial means by which, through the Ukrainian parliament, the Rada, extended his stay in office by martial law. Severally, over the course of a year, he has extended it in slices of 3 months, 3 months, 3 months. The last one was just done a few weeks ago, and he has another 3 months mandate, 90 days. So it's not likely that President Zelensky will get that his meeting. But anyway, it's one of the discussions put up in the agenda for the meeting coming up in Istanbul in a few days' time. President Putin is also being sought after by President Trump of America. People have speculated that Trump may be visiting China on September 3rd to attend the activities commemorating the 80th anniversary of the defeat of Japan by the Chinese during World War II. It's already agreed that President Putin will be at that meeting. That will be probably his 42nd or 43rd meeting with President Xi Jinping, since both of them became presidents of their respective countries. But while President Putin is assured to be there, President Trump is speculated as being possibly a guest of the Chinese, because after seeking a meeting or seeking to talk with with the Chinese leader Xi Jinping for so long, he eventually got his phone call with Xi Jinping. And one of the outcomes of that meeting, the phone call with Xi Jinping, was an invitation to China extended to President Donald Trump. So it is speculated that President Donald Trump may be at that ceremony in September 3rd of 2025. And if he is there, that will mean that there's the possibility of a tripartite meeting between Putin, Xi Jinping, and Trump. But all this is just conjecture. The war has been going on. Yesterday, the Russians did what they've been doing relentlessly again. They sent out 420 drones all across different cities in Ukraine and send an accompanying feast of 20 hypersonic missiles to follow the drone attack. Their target were military complexes where drones and many other military facilities, military hardware were being built all across Ukraine. In the eyes of the Russian military, they said in their statement that all their objectives were attained. But in the eyes of the Ukrainian Ministry of Defense, they put out a statement that they destroyed all the drones and all the hypersonic missiles sent to them by the Russians. People tend not to believe the Ukrainians too much because video evidence on Telegram and on different channels tend to show a lot of destruction all across Ukraine. Good day and welcome to my channel, Ebima Amungo's perspective on global affairs. If you are new to this channel, please subscribe. If you have any comments regarding the ideas I express, please put them in the comment section. Like and share. The support for Ukraine is not waning in any means, by any means at all. It's not waning. Lindsey Graham was on TV recently, a few days back. Lindsey Graham, I should point out, is the long-term war hawk who has been on Ukraine's side for a long time. Our first introduction of Lindsey Graham and his involvement with Ukraine was in 2017 when him and then Senator McCain visited Ukraine to assure the Ukrainian army that they will prevail in the fight they had then with the rebellious group in Donbass, who then were just supported by Russia. Lindsey Graham has been the greatest cheerleader, war hawk, and the one who has prompted the most bipartisan support for the Ukrainians in the American Senate. And Lindsey Graham was celebrating the other day on American TV that it is certain now that Trump will come hard on all those countries who are supporting Russia and helping Russia to evade the sanctions being put on her. Because in recent times, President Trump said he has given Russia 50 days to come to the table or negotiating table or call a ceasefire, after which he will put crushing sanctions on the countries that support Russia in evading sanctions. His plan is to put 100% tariffs on all of those countries. And Lindsey Graham was very, very happy about it. He has said, in his own words, Trump is going to give Putin a whooping. We are looking forward to seeing that whooping when it happens. But why should it be a big trouble that Trump is, by all those who support Ukraine, that these three countries, particularly China, India, and Brazil, are at the heart of helping Russia evade the excruciating pain of sanctions, 22,000 rounds of sanctions, of which the 18th round of sanctions was just placed recently by European Union. The truth is this: since turning to the West, we should remember that when the Olympics, the Beijing Winter Olympics took place in 2022, President Putin visited Beijing and asked that he hoped that the Chinese were in his corner. And they told him, yes, they understood his reality, his geopolitical, the necessity of his securing his space as NATO was expanding too close to Russia. They understood completely what the intent of NATO was. So they assured him that they will not intervene in anything. So when he started a special military operation against the Ukrainians on 24th of February 2022, it was very clear then that Russia had an agenda and Russia had pivoted completely from the West. In fact, President Putin mentioned that in his statement that Russia's destiny now lies in the East. Let's not forget that a larger part of Russia a vast part of Russia is in Asia, Siberia, and the whole lot of it. But for over 300 years, since the proclamation of Sir Peter the Great, Russia had sought to be part of the West and have tried to modernize and had tried to become a Western European country. This effort was even extended more during the 30 years of Putin's reign, especially after the reign of Boris Yeltsin and the fall of the Soviet Union. The Russians did all they could to try and become a part of the West, but they were not welcomed in the West because there's extensive Russophobia, racism, and so many other things that tend to make the West feel that the Russians were not part of them and they were doing everything to stave off the Russians despite the efforts of the Russians. So when they pivoted to the West, to the East, when he mentioned this pivot to the East, it was in the assurance that he was going to have China in his corner. And in that decision, since the special military operation started and there has been crisis and sanctions, Russia's trade with China has grown, Russia's trade with India has grown, and Russia's trade with Brazil has grown. But even then, Russia's trade with the whole collective South has grown. With China particularly, last year the trade was $240 billion, of which China imported a lot of oil and gas extensively, and China sent machinery, cars, automobile products, pharmaceutical products, the other way around. In fact, both of them now trade in their local currencies. As for India, the sanctions was a great benefit to the Indians. And because of that, the Indians have extended their trade with Russia by almost 9% last year to $71 billion. $71 billion made up mainly of Russian oil and gas. They send some few products, but by way, most of the products, the balance of trade is in favor of the Russians. Because the Russians not only send oil and gas, they also send fertilizer. Fertilizer also makes up a vast amount of the $12 billion trade between Brazil and Russia, where they get Russian oil and gas, Russia's fertilizer, and other chemical products. And then Brazil sends what they are good at, which is soybeans and meat and some other agricultural products. But just like India, the balance of trade is in favor of the Russians. The Russians have found a way around the Western countries, and this has strengthened them. And this is the contention that Lindsey Graham is so intent in destroying. This is also the relationship that the EU is so intent in destroying. And in their last round of sanctions, they placed some sanctions on some Chinese and some Indian companies. Placing sanctions on Chinese and Indian companies has brought the wrath of the Chinese. The Chinese have said they do not respect unilateral sanctions, not under the framework of the UN or the Security Councils, and that they will take retaliatory action against the EU. The Chinese taking retaliatory action against the EU will further destroy, shatter, and bring big pain and stress to the European Union economies, who have China as the only market where they feel they get some profit and success when they sell the few products that can compete in China. Products like cognac, products like luxury bags. Because if it is products like automotive products and cars and machinery, the edge the EU used to have in China is gone. But there are still aspirational products that still is sought after by the Chinese, and for that. So it is a threat that the Chinese is placing on, that you either take off those sanctions or we will get back at you. The same too has been done by the Indians. The Indians have said, it is hypocritical that you will be buying oil from the Nord Stream, from the Turkish Stream pipeline. You'll be buying oil and gas through intermediaries, and then you'll be placing sanctions on us. Especially as most of the oil that India buys from Russia is refined and sent to Europe. So it's Europe that still is the biggest buyer of that same oil that is bought, that is processed by the Indians. So all these attempts by the European Union to continue to put pain on not only Russia, but the partners of Russia is the same thing too that Trump is threatening. But even as they are trying to put pain, those who want to continue to support Ukraine are not relenting. The British defense minister, British defense minister, we call it Defense Secretary John Haley, has come up and said he's going to start a 50-day marathon drive to try and get support for Ukraine. These 50 days that is the grace period before they have the sanctions on Russia and its partners. They are trying to raise as much money for Ukraine from all the supporters. So he has become the spearhead of that particular process. And in the drone war that was launched over the past 3 days, it was reported that Ukraine lost 3 Patriot missile batteries and radars. But quickly, the Germans have come up and said they are going to replace those 3 with 5 new batteries. Those 3 batteries that were obliterated by Kinjal. So the Russians have just found a way to make nonsense of any arms supply to the Ukrainians. So Boris Pistorius just announced that he and Petersgate met in Washington and they are going to replace the Patriot batteries that had been damaged or obliterated with 5 new ones. Germany continues to supply arms and supply military materials to the Ukrainians. But this is not popular in Germany at all. Today, Alice Wendel, the AFD, Alternative for Deutschland party leader, who have over 26% support in the Bundesliga. Did I say Bundesliga? Sorry, in the parliament of Germany, has came up and said that it is not a nice thing that the Germans under Friedrich Merz is now sending so much money to Ukraine while there are social crises in their own country. It is this social crisis that has meant that so many Germans ordinary Germans don't support all the activities of the German state. They now protest. But Friedrich Merz, and being a former leader of BlackRock, seems to want this project to go on so that there shall be lending to the German state by bankers. They have their own agendas most times. So the Germans are now carrying the torch, bearing the torch that Biden used to carry, especially as Trump has stepped up and Trump has put a period of grace. He's doing all this now to try and become the new leader of the Ukrainian cause. But even this is happening at a time that Ukraine is circumspect. They are doing introspection of their new reality. Zelensky is worried. Zelensky is in a bad place. And the Ukrainians are also in a bad place. Yesterday, I talked about, in my video, I talked about how there was euphoria in Ukraine for a brief moment because of the victory of Alexander Usyk in the World Boxing Tournament he had with Daniel Dubois. But the reality of the war made that happiness short-lived. When just in that same night, they had to start contending with all the missiles and the drones that the Russians were sending at them. And it is unrelenting and it is continuing. So now we have a situation where Zelensky is looking at making peace. He is finding a way. Because the Chinese who support Russia the Indians who support Russia, the Brazilians who support Russia, and the whole of BRICS that have become a full bulwark for Russia are continuing their support and continuing their find a way of continuing to grow despite all the attempts to undermine her. Trump, in his first few days, put sanctions and started a trade war with the Chinese. But since then, despite the trade war and despite all the obstacles put in front of the Chinese have grown their economy by 5% in the first half of the year, 5.3% specifically. So their economy is growing for one simple thing. The trade between China and the US only constitute 2%, 2.5% of Chinese GDP. It has reduced it significantly. It is not so important anymore to the Chinese. And besides, even though export is still the biggest form, or China is the biggest exporting country in the world, export earnings is now just 20% of contribution to the GDP of China. They have diversified their economy significantly. But even then, as they export, just as they have tried to do so many other things, they have now starting to export mainly to third world and BRIC countries, to other countries in the South like them. They are not exporting as much as they used to export to America anymore. They export to Latin America, to ASEAN, to Europe, and to Africa. So they have diversified the whole range of their export. And when you look at this now, it has given them a lot of power. We should understand that the Chinese are the ones who are creating alternatives for a lot of countries. When the Chinese have a system like the Beidou navigation system, they are not replacing the GSM system. They have just given people an alternative to the GSM. And it was that alternative that helped Iran a lot in their war with Israel, because they were able to mitigate any actions that may have been taken against them were they dependent on the GSM. And we saw the full effect of what the Beidou system and how accurate it was when they were targeting military facilities in Israel. In the same breath, too, when they say that they want to give an alternative for payment system, it does not mean that they want the dollar to fall. They are just saying that they want an alternative. It is this alternative that has helped a lot of African countries to have access to smartphones at a cheaper rate, helped a lot of countries in the world, Pakistan, India, all over, because the Chinese give people alternative, and it is this alternative that those who used to control the world don't particularly like China for. The alternatives are myriad. If you want to buy solar panels, you get from China. If you want to get equipment, CNC equipment, manufacturing equipment, intermediate products, you get from China, and you get them at a much more lower price than they used to. There are also systems like nobody can do, no country, most of the countries of the world now use Huawei's base stations. That's an alternative to Ericsson and Alcatel and all the European systems out there that were much more expensive. So this is where the world is. China became an alternative pathway for Russia. And for that, China is being demonized, and they want to finish China and kill BRICS and kill all the institutions that the Chinese are trying to promote. The Shanghai Cooperation Organization, BRICS. But BRICS is getting stronger. BRICS is getting stronger. India had been a recalcitrant, slow-walking member of BRICS. But despite the behavior of India, recently India and China are getting to improve their relationships. This is just as they're expanding BRICS, bringing in new members like Vietnam, Indonesia, they're bringing Malaysia, they're bringing new members into BRICS and expanding BRICS. And it is this alternative pathway, both for finance, both for technology, resources, that is undermining the once mighty power of the cabals that used to be in the West under the framework of the G7 in America. China is not light. And it is for that reason that Lindsey Graham is calling for his bone-crushing sanctions against China. 500% for everybody that trades with Russia and helps Russia escape the sanctions put on them. I don't think that's going to work. Let us observe and see what's going to happen going forward. And let's just hope that in the discussions that come up on Wednesday, there shall be a pathway for peace. Maybe, finally, the Ukrainians may want to pull one on the Russians or surprise the world and give some concessions to the Russians. This is where I end my video for today. If you have any comments, please put them in the comment section. If you're new to this channel, please subscribe. Do well to like and share. Until I see you in my next video. Good night.